Hello and welcome to round two. Pardon the dog barking in the background. Godless Moms podcast without things melting down right in the first couple of minutes. But yes, welcome to round two of talking about death, which is supposed to be a very somber and serious topic. But yes, this is our episode about death and speaking to your children about death from a secular perspective, which we meant to do on Tuesday,
Yes.
but the sky fell. So
That's right.
But everything is fixed now, with the exception of the dog. The dog will probably bark again during this.
Although the dog is probably fixed too. But anyway.
Yeah, she is. So yeah, before we get started, a couple of announcements. You can follow Janice on Twitter at Divorcing Religion and me at Godless_mom. And you can also go ahead and hit subscribe so that you get when we go live next time, or hit like if you're watching from Facebook. And Janice, you have stuff coming up on your Divorcing Religion website, don't you?
I do. So actually on Twitter, I'm at Divorce Religion, and I'm also at wise_counselor. You can follow me on both those accounts. And I am getting ready to start my Divorcing Religion workshop again. It's an online workshop. It lasts for 6 weeks. We meet every Sunday morning, just like church, from 10 until 12 Pacific time. And we talk about what it's like to divorce religion, to lose our faith or leave our faith. It's a small group. It's very supportive, and I encourage you to check it out. So we'll have a link below, and I think within the next by the end of today, hopefully we'll make sure everything's gung-ho on the website so that you can sign up there. And I really hope you'll join us, because it's helped a lot of people.
Yep, I can attest to being able to read a lot of the stuff that you talk about in your workshop, and talking to you a lot about your experiences and how you do the workshop. And it is absolutely something, if you're struggling with leaving religion in any way, shape, or form, it is something you absolutely have to check out. 100%. So now that we have a stream that is working and Janice is on her computer, not her phone this time.
That's right.
We should death, because this is a question that we get asked constantly. It's like every second email that I get from my readers. They ask me how to talk to their kids about death, because a lot of people are like, they're just used to being able to refer to heaven and an afterlife and all of this stuff, and without that, it's just kind of a hole. And I mean, I'm not speaking from experience, because as you know, I was raised without religion, and my parents never told me I was going to heaven or hell or anything like that. So it's always been something that's kind of, I've struggled to explain, I guess, to people who used to be religious, just because it's so normal for me. It's the only way to deal with death for me. Like my parents, they were like overly atheistic about death. They would, like, if somebody else said that the person is in a better place or something like that, my parents wouldn't like object or anything. And so there were moments in my childhood where I was like, okay, well, maybe they did go to heaven or something like that. But overwhelmingly, I did not believe that. Like, I just knew that was the end of it. And I coped with it fine. And that's my parents told me the truth. They're gone, and it's final. And that's that. And it wasn't cold like that. Like,
Right.
Like, they were very, very,
Right.
very, very comforting. And I remember my very first experience with death was when my parents had I was born. When I was born, my parents had 2 basset hounds, Archie and Jughead, and and I loved them so much. Like, my parents have pictures of me sleeping with them and stuff like that as a toddler. And And when they died, they kind of died pretty close together. And I remember just one night I came downstairs. I was so sad. And I just sat in my mom's lap and I said, I miss Archie and Jughead. And she just said, me too. And she, stroked my hair and comforted me. That you don't need to make something up to comfort a child in the moment that that's happening. And I found that extremely comforting to the point that I still remember it. And that was when I was very little. But that is how my family, that's how my family dealt with it. I'm very curious about how your family dealt with death.
Sure. Well, even before we go there, some people might notice I'm wearing my orange ribbon, and we just had Orange Shirt Day recently in Canada. And the ribbon is commemorating the many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children who were forced into residential school and never made it home because they died while they were at residential school. The abuse was so horrendous and the neglect. And also, I want to mention that we are grateful to be coming to you today from the unceded traditional territory of the Syilx people in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, Canada. And you might see I have some, I don't know how well you can see them, they're butterfly earrings. And a lot of people, when they are thinking about death, they do think in terms of a metamorphosis, a transition. Butterflies are a super common thing people kind of refer to when they're talking about death, or they might say, every time I see a white feather, I think of the departed person. We have stories that we tell ourselves, and we have rituals around death. But death isn't really talked about too much. And we just recently had Sasha Sagan on our show, and it was such a joy to talk with her about secular ritual and the importance of ritual when we're raising children. And that also had us thinking about death and how do we talk with kids about death. And my background was very fundamentalist Christian. And so for me, death just meant, well, there's a verse in the Bible, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And so if you die and you love Jesus, well, no sweat. You're going to heaven. You'll be with the angels, and you'll be with other people who love Jesus. And so it'll be great. Too bad for you if you don't say the magic words, though, because you're going to that other place. And that's where a lot of the issues come into play. The fear of hell, the concept of hell, and it can be so debilitating to people, even after they have divorced religion, even after they recognize, okay, what I was taught was incorrect. It's still possible for them to really struggle and grapple with the burden that was placed on them when they were indoctrinated with a fear of hell. And that doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with indoctrination. And it takes as long as it takes for people to be able to walk through that. It can help to speak with a secular therapist like myself. We've included some links also in the description. A few things that might be helpful for people who are coping with that issue or trying to overcome fear of hell. And when it comes to talking with our kids, there are things to keep in mind. Like, I loved what you said. Your mom and dad, they didn't sugarcoat. They didn't go into long, drawn out explanations. You want to keep it simple, sweetheart, right? You want to just tell them age appropriately, something sad has happened. Grandpa has died. And he won't be with us anymore. We won't get to visit with him anymore. And then you leave space for the child to process what you've said, answer questions that they have, and be honest. You don't have to make things up. I don't know is also an acceptable answer in parenting. You're allowed to say, I don't know, when you don't know something. And we want to talk about our feelings and allow our kids to express their feelings, just like you did about Archie and Jughead. You felt sad, you missed them. And your mom did such a good job saying that she misses them too. And there are, we can develop our own rituals around death, around letting go. If it's a teenager who's mourning the loss of someone, they're going to be able to understand things on a deeper level, and they can do some things on their own. Maybe they want to create a photo album, maybe a shrine of some sort, maybe a memory box that honors this person. Maybe they want to go out and do something that was really fun in honor of that other person. And it's important for us also to say the name of the decedent, of the one who has died. And you are allowed to use that word, died, dying, death. Don't shy away from that. Don't say they passed away, they passed on. We have to accept this new reality. There are tasks of mourning, and one of the tasks of mourning is accepting the reality of the loss.
Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. And the thing that you mentioned about how we were just talking before we went live about how that was probably one of the most shocking things that I learned when I started the whole Godless Mom social media space. Um, I learned that atheists still fear hell, and I just assumed you're an atheist, you don't believe in that stuff anymore, and they don't. But it's not rational. And we were talking about how, like, I'm terrified of spiders, and it's very funny when I see one. But it's not rational. Like, in my head, in the moment, as I'm yelling about it, I know in my head that there is no threat, and it's still terrifying to me. It's not a rational thing. Fear is not rational, and so when a lot of people respond to atheists who say they still struggle with the fear of hell, they'll respond and say that's ridiculous. You can't be an atheist then, but you're not understanding that this is not a rational fear.
Yeah, nothing quite like answering from a place lacking utter compassion. If someone tells you
Yeah.
they're scared of something, don't tell them they're being ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
fear is a burden. And fear, I mean, we developed the whole fear evolutionarily as a survival mechanism, this sort of thing, but it can get hijacked, and we do have irrational fears and phobias that develop for whatever reason because of early experiences or early teachings or whatever. So telling someone that they're ridiculous doesn't help. And frankly, so I'm a therapist and I work with clients, and me also telling them there's no such thing as hell, that actually doesn't do much for them. It might be like another brick or whatever, like that's adding to their security as they're rebuilding their platform in this secular life. But in the moment, they're unlikely to believe it. It has to become their own, their own truth. And so for me, I started watching as many YouTube videos as I could about hell, about why I don't have to believe in hell, or how other people overcame their fear of hell. And then another big issue for me, besides the hell one, was actually just coming to terms with the fact that there was not going to be a heaven either. Because I had always, and Christians are told, we don't grieve like the world grieves. We don't mourn as the world mourns, because our hope lies, beyond this life. We're going to see each other again. We're going to rejoice. So that feels comforting in the moment when you're a Christian, but actually it can serve to really short circuit and complicate the grieving process. We have to accept the fact that this loved one is gone. Our life is going to be marked now, before and after this loss. It's serious, it's significant, it's deserving of ritual and process. When I think in terms of in the Jewish tradition, when somebody dies, and they'll cover all the mirrors in the house, because you don't have to worry about how you look when you're mourning. Your life has just fallen apart. You can
Yeah.
look like shit. You don't need to be worrying about that. Or in the old Victorian times, you would dress in black for a prescribed amount of time. And then once that time was passed, you could dress in gray. And then once that time passed, you could introduce mauve or other colors. And those were an indicator to people who would see you, and they would recognize, oh, that person's in mourning. I don't want to add to their burden. I won't ask them to do this or tell them to do that. And it also could serve as a reminder to the person who is in mourning. Oh, okay, yeah, I've mourned for this period of time now. It is acceptable for me to smile again or laugh again, or want to do this or that. I mean, that's how they did things back in the day. We're not bound by those rules anymore, but there was some value to that, and different traditions mourn in different ways.
Yeah. And I think especially with kids, it's really important to understand that the goal is not to stop the sadness, because they have a right to feel sad. They should experience and fully go through that sadness, because that's how you recover from, not that you ever really recover from losing somebody that you love, but that's how you get back to a regular life. And I think too many parents look at their kids and they don't want their kids to be sad, and I totally empathize with that. I can't stand seeing my kids upset in any way. But it's like, in this point, you have to let them feel it. You have to let them feel it. And trying to make up stories or make it more gentle so that they don't feel it as much, that's not helping them. That's prolonging the mourning process, because it's going to eventually sink in that they are never going to see this person again. And it's not helping them by like allowing them to kind of think otherwise. And also, it's also important that if your kid does want to believe that they're going to heaven, and that's their choice and nobody's pushing it on them or anything like that, you can let them believe that too. It's not a threat to your atheism. It's not a threat to anything like that. Like that's how they're choosing to cope. And as long as they're not hurting anybody else, I think that kids should be allowed to cope however they cope. But yeah, I think it's super important to encourage your kids to feel that sadness and to really go through it.
It's reasonable to investigate how different groups of people, different cultures and traditions, the stories they tell around death, and the wording that they use. So I have often heard people say that death is just like walking from one room to another. You were here, and now you're there. You're not here anymore. I think that for me, I would focus on the fact that if they were sick, if they were languishing and in pain, their suffering is over. They're not suffering anymore. And then really, so focus a lot on memories while also acknowledging the sorrow that this person isn't here anymore. There's an African proverb that says, when an old person dies, it's as though a library has burned down.
That's
And that's
cool.
true. Yeah, all the stories. So they live on in our stories, in our memories, in our actions and rituals, and one day we'll be gone too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about exploring different beliefs and stuff like that with your kids. Maybe not when you're experiencing a death or something like that, but you can prepare them for things like that by exploring different beliefs. And also um, memories. Focusing on the memories after the fact is something that's gotten us, like my kids and us, through the loss of our dog. And my kids have been pretty lucky in that they are, they haven't really had a big death in their life. Well, my daughter has in her on her mom's side of the family. She's a stepdaughter, and but my son has not had to, except for our dog Rocky, and of course we lost our cat last year.
Right.
And if you know our family, that's a pretty devastating loss. So we
Mhm.
focus on memories, and we still, to this day, we still talk about Rocky, despite the fact that he died 6 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Anytime the word Rocky comes up, we all in unison go, "Oh, Rocky."
Yeah,
And
and we've lost a cat and a dog, as well, and those were significant losses in our family because pets are family
yeah.
members. Um, Fear is something also that can really be a big issue for kids when somebody dies, depending how the person dies. Some people are murdered, some people die very abruptly. Um, there's uh, there's all different ways, so it's important to make space and time for your child to ask you questions, explain simply but thoroughly what's happened, and also potentially, if it's a grandparent or an uncle or auntie or someone that's died, um, and there are things that are going to be happening over the next week related to the burial and remembering that person, all that stuff. Explain some of the things that are coming so the child or the young person isn't caught off guard. Um, and also you can give them tasks, small tasks to do so they can feel like they're part of what's going on, because they're sad too and their feelings
Mhm.
matter too. And we have, in Western society, managed to like sterilize the concept of death to the point where it's almost unhelpful with the grieving process. There is something to be said for seeing a body,
Mhm.
for seeing that's the person. They're not there anymore. The body's there, but the person I loved isn't there anymore. There's a finality to it. In some traditions, the family members of the deceased prepare the body for burial. And I mean, we know about wakes. I don't know if they still do it, but in some parts of the world, the deceased would be propped up and there for everybody to see, and people are coming around and they're talking with each other. They're having a drink. They're sharing a drink. They're remembering and celebrating and crying. And different groups have different ways of dealing with it. But there's accepting the finality of the loss is significant. And then also we can, and we must actually, it's one of the tasks of mourning also, as we're moving forward now in our new life without the deceased, we're finding a way to make an enduring connection or a lasting connection with them. So when we think about them, we have somewhere in our mind, oh yeah, that belongs there. That person belongs there. And sometimes, to help make sense of the loss, we might do something like start a scholarship in the name of the person who died, or do something like that, make a donation in their name to a charity that would have been meaningful to them. Doing things like that, those are steps that can actually be quite helpful in our own healing.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Like that, a horrific story that's been going around the internet lately of Gabby Petito, and
Hmm.
how her parents put together a foundation for other victims of domestic abuse, and also to help families who have missing people
Hmm.
find more resources, because Gabby, as we know, Gabby got a lot of attention and most missing people don't. But
Especially not murdered and missing women and Indigenous girls. They are not getting nearly the attention.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's a good way to honor, especially in a situation like that where it's unexpected and you have to find a way to cope. I believe the words that her parents used was that it made her death not for nothing, right? Because
Right,
now they
right.
can help. help a bunch of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a really great way of coping with death, and but with kids as well. Like if you do something like that, get your kids involved and ask them how they feel about it. Ask them what kind of a charity they think would be suitable to donate to. Get them involved. Ask them for input on how to remember this person and how to pay your respects to this person, because they may have their own ideas, and kids are, I mean, they always have their own ideas. And some of them are quite beautiful, and they make a lot of sense. But yeah, definitely something that kids deal with a lot is fear when a death happens. And I know that, like, when my grandfather died, I was afraid of death. And but it wasn't my own death that I became afraid of. It was everybody else's. It was like suddenly I was like, okay, now everybody I love can die, you know? It's like, I remember like being a little kid and lying in bed worrying about my dad dying or my mom dying. And I think a lot of kids go through that, where they worry. As soon as they kind of understand death, they start to worry about their loved ones dying. So I think it's something that should be a topic of conversation that doesn't just happen when somebody dies. I think it's also a way to just have a casual conversation about what people think happens when you die, stuff like that.
Yep, and that's a way also to acknowledge and reinforce the finiteness of this life and how precious each day is here. The time that we have with our families or without our families, the time that we have to enjoy life and make a difference, if we choose to make a difference on this earth, trying to leave it a better place for the people who come after us. It's a taboo topic because there's so much fear around it. We don't like to talk about it in case like it happens, but guess what? It is going to happen. It's happening all the time. So a gift that we can give our children is the knowledge that they can come to us with anything, with any question, and we're not scared to talk with them about it. And if we don't have answers, we can again look for some answers, or what do other people think? What do other people believe? It's a powerful topic for sure. Did you ever see that Next Generation episode? I know you're a fellow Trekkie. It was Next Gen, and everyone was disappearing one by one on the from the Enterprise. It was like some kind of weird bubble that was going on, and then eventually, I think it was like only Beverly Crusher that was left, and I was just sobbing my eyes out because of what you were saying. That fear, that knowledge that everybody is going to die at some point. It was a really powerful episode.
Oh, they all are, aren't they?
Yeah, I love me some Star Trek.
Yeah, I love it too.
Remember Me, it's called. Thank you, Simona.
Fellow Trekkies in the audience. So Fernando said, I've been told that it's perceived as extremely rude if you hear, yeah, X is in a better place, and you reply, there's no such thing as a heaven. I learned not to do that again. So that's an interesting comment, because I know that, like, me as an atheist, if you're at my funeral, which it's not going to be a funeral, it'll just be like lots of drinks and a barbecue. I don't want people to say I'm in a better place, because this is the better place I could be, like, with my family. There's no better place than that. That's an insult to my family. It's the most ridiculous thing you could possibly say, because there's nothing on earth that no place that I would rather be than with my family.
And yet, so if we're talking to someone else who's lost somebody and they make that comment, oh, my dad is in a better place, far be it from me to step in there and say, nope. It's different if we are asked what we think,
yes,
or what we believe, and particularly when someone's in a fragile emotional state. And they already have a set of beliefs. It's not for us to go like a bull in a china shop, smashing down and trying to destroy their beliefs. That's not going to be helpful.
I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago called "How to Know When to Shut the Bleep Up," and it was about. I was at the pool and it was after my swim and I was in the hot tub and there was this lady who I was talking to and she was telling me about her grandson who had an aneurysm and he was in the
Oh
hospital
dear.
and he was like on the verge of death and his mother posted on Facebook that she needed prayers and a whole bunch of people were saying we're sending our prayers, and then of course this lady tells me that he recovered and it was because of all of the prayers, and
Oh,
she's literally just faced the potential death of her grandson like last week, and I'm not about to say what are you talking about, you crazy person, like I'm not about to do that in that situation that's not appropriate to then start arguing about her beliefs. I just agreed. I said that's wonderful, that's such a
I'm
beautiful
so
story, I'm
happy
so
for
glad.
you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you don't there's a time and a place. Like argue on Twitter, that's great. Argue on Facebook, good idea. Don't do it at a funeral. Okay? Do not do it at a funeral. And that goes the other way too. Like I was saying, if you're at an atheist funeral, I've seen a meme that's been sent around that says it's like a sign at a humanist funeral that says this is a humanist funeral. Out of respect, please avoid saying things like he's in a better place or we'll see him soon or something like that. And that's true. If you're in an atheist funeral, don't say stuff like that. Like just like we're not going to argue with the fact that you think that your loved one is in heaven. Don't come to our funerals and tell us that we are.
Yes, it's twofold the reason that we attend such services. It's one is because we want to be able to express our own grief over the loss and do so in a place where it's acceptable to be doing that with other people who could understand why we're sad, and also it's an opportunity for us to lend support, to
Mhm.
show support to the family and the loved ones of the dead person. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't be a dick. How about that? Just go and be polite.
And grief comes in so many different forms. When you watch crime dramas or something like that, and somebody says, "Oh, he wasn't acting like somebody who just lost his wife." Well, you don't know how that person normally acts when they lose their wife, so you have no idea. And everybody acts differently and goes down a different path of grief than everybody else. And sometimes you just have to, like I said before, if they're not hurting anybody, you just have to let them grieve the way that they want to grieve. um that said, if it is your child and you're months down the road from the death and they're still struggling on a daily basis, and it's it's starting to really affect their lives, their day-to-day lives, that might be the point where you get them some help. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with seeking outside help to help your child get through grief that they're struggling with, and it
Or to help
happens.
you, or to
Yeah,
help you get through it. It's grieving is pardon me, it's the hardest work you'll ever do,
yeah,
to
yeah,
let go of something, to accept the loss and face rebuilding your life without this person, and pardon me, in my experience, also without the belief system. So when I'm
yeah,
working with clients, we talk about the grief over losing religious faith. If you were raised in it, if you were involved in it for decades, as I was, then to lose that, to no longer have that, to no longer think of Jesus is my cosmic big brother, God's up there taking care of me. If you don't have that anymore, it really can plunge you into a total existential crisis, and you are grieving just as if you lost your partner, as if your best friend died. And the problem is, of course, your employer doesn't honor that or recognize that. Most people don't recognize that. It's a grief that's not recognized.
yeah,
So it's important to be able to talk to other people who can understand your grief, and you're not going to feel judged. You're going to feel heard and
yeah,
supported.
yeah. That is super, super important. And yeah, with death, with grieving over the death of a loved one, you can also seek out support groups too. There's
Mhm.
lots of grief support groups out there, and I think there's even some that are secular. I'd have to look that
Yeah,
up.
you want to be careful. If you're a secular person grieving a loss, do a bit of research before you join any group, and see if they are coming at it from a spiritual or Christian bent. Then it's potentially not going to be a group you're super comfortable in.
Yeah, I can't even imagine like grieving somebody and then going to a support group and having them all start insisting that they're in heaven. I just would lose my crap.
Yes, yes, and then you do also run into the people who are quite convinced that they are still able to communicate, that
Oh
they're
God.
communicating with the deceased. And I understand that missing the person so much, uh, and wanting that communication to continue, but we're extremely vulnerable if we start believing in things of a supernatural type
Yeah.
nature, because the charlatans abound.
Yeah, and that's actually something that happened with my grandma when my grandfather died. Now my grandfather was he was a complicated man, and he was I was afraid of him, and
Mm,
he wasn't the nicest dad growing up, without getting too personal, but he was definitely worth being afraid of from time to
mm,
time. And when he passed, I was sad because he had his his warm side too. But my grandma really kind of like she's tough and she got through it and everything like that, but she started to see this reflection. It was just a reflection on her fence that was in the shape of a cross. And I actually
mm,
have a tub in my closet back here with like a stack of pictures of this cross, like this high, because my grandma just would take pictures every day of it. It was literally just like the reflection of the bevel of her window on the fence.
yeah. Mhm.
But she swore that it was my grandfather coming down to communicate with her every single day. And I didn't argue with her, but I was also pretty young when that happened, and I started to like it started to affect how I was thinking, because I remember going home,
Mm,
and at night I would be laying in bed and I would be thinking, is he watching me right now?
mm,
And
mm,
I would be afraid of that. I would be afraid
mhm,
if he was watching me. And it took me a while to kind of shake that, despite the fact that I never believed in any of that stuff. I was still young and
mhm,
impressionable, and you can't help
mhm.
but wonder. And so, yeah, it's strange how some people kind of cope. And then I have other family members who say that they speak to the dead and that they communicate on a regular basis with my grandfather. And my 2 years ago we lost my aunt, one of my favorite aunts. She was awesome. We lost her, and people say that they still talk to her, and that's how they cope. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm
There's quite a difference between talking to the deceased and thinking that we hear answers from them, or that they are communicating back with us. And as you say, yeah, there's a kind of a coping mechanism that's going on there, and people grieve in different ways. People experience that grief differently. Some people stop eating altogether. They have no appetite.
Mhm.
Some people become ravenously hungry. Some people get insomnia. Some people just sleep all the time. Some people do have some hallucinations, or think that they see someone or hear someone. Some people can become clumsy, and it's because like their head is in a fog. They're in a mental fog. So it can also be helpful, if we're grieving, to do a little bit of research and see what are some commonly and even uncommonly experienced side effects of grief. And
Mhm.
like we've been saying, don't be afraid to reach out to a qualified therapist if you need help.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no shame in wanting help, and it's for your own future self as well, because when we don't, process our grief that can manifest in really unhealthy ways going forward for the rest
Yeah.
of your life.
Mhm.
Addictions, eating junk food, you know, giving up all
Mhm.
the exercise, stuff like that. Like it can really manifest in terrible ways. So definitely ask for help if you need help grieving. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not, I mean, every single one of us struggles in that situation with grief, and we struggle in different ways, and it's totally normal to need help.
I heard something that I thought was really brilliant on the CBC the other day. This broadcaster was talking and he was saying, you know how everyone is like in the 70s, hey, what's your sign? You know, your astrological sign. He said, the truth is we're all born under the same sign, and that sign is exit. That's
Yeah.
the sign we're all born under. I was like, oh, that is good. Some good stuff on CBC. Yeah, because the clock starts ticking when we draw our
Yeah.
first breath, and it's a wild, crazy ride full of twists and turns. And then one day the ride comes to an end.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, like a lot of people say that they're not afraid of death. I think that there's two different ways of looking at it. Like I'm not afraid of what comes after cuz nothing in my understanding, nothing comes after. I'm not afraid of that. What makes me afraid is my kids being without me, my dog, like what happens with my dog, just
Mhm.
the unfinished business. I don't like the idea of the world going on without me. Sorry. I don't.
Yeah. One thing that was helpful for me, and we put a link to it in the notes as well, this little video on YouTube by this group or whatever called Kurzgesagt, and the video is about optimistic nihilism. And that was super helpful when I was coming to terms with the thought of there's no hell, that's great, but actually there's probably no heaven either. And what does that mean? Like, how am I going to cope? My mom's in her 80s. We're quite close. I hate the thought that I'm going to have to go on without her. I also have a daughter in her 20s with significant health issues, and sometimes death looms large.
Mhm.
And we just do a lot of hospital time with her. And that's hard to cope with as well. It's scary and tiring, and I just hate the thought of ever having to be without someone that I love and who means so much to me. There are things we can
Mhm.
do on this end to try and prepare. Like you were talking about, you hate the idea of your kids being without you, then you're going to make sure that you have a will in place, that you and your partner have talked about this. And, you know, if I'm ever in an accident and, you know, here's what I want you to do. Here's how long
Mhm.
I want to be kept in a coma. Here's what I want done with my organs, or I want to be cremated, or whatever the thing is. Talk about those things. Talk about them. Don't let them be taboo. Don't let that
Yeah.
fear hold you hostage.
Yeah, I write for my job, I write for a funeral insurance company, and I have to continually write that stuff about how it
Mm.
is it is really the most compassionate gift that you can leave behind is not money, it's not your house, it's not anything like that. The most compassionate gift you can leave behind is making all of those decisions for your family so they don't have to when that's um they don't have to do that when the time comes. And sorry, we're getting spammed in
Yeah,
the
I
chat.
see that. No one say that. If we can get rid of that, that's great. Yeah, you're right. It is a very compassionate thing to do, to think of our family and try and take care of those decisions ahead of time, so our family members aren't left wondering what we would want. And also, it's getting more and more popular. Funerals are so expensive. People are starting to put aside money now to help cover those costs, and that might be worth a call or a visit to a funeral home of your choice, and think about
Yeah.
those things and talk about those things.
That's why I told my family, don't have a funeral for me. Just a few drinks of barbecue and throw my body in the body farm.
Oh,
Like, those forensic science study places,
yes.
because I have for a very long time been obsessed with like forensic science and wrongful convictions,
Mm,
and I can't think of a better, more poetic way for my body to be used,
mm,
to enhance the science that helps us ensure that we're putting away the right people for the crimes that are committed.
yes.
Um, so yeah, I'm
That's such
there
a
are ways
cool
to do it for
idea.
free too. Just seriously,
Yeah.
just toss me in there.
And for me, I have decided that I would like any usable parts to go to anyone that could use those parts, including for medical research or whatever. And then I think I'd prefer just to be cremated. There's some kind of technique they've been trying out in BC over the last number of years where they actually just dissolve the person. So there's nothing less salinization or something like that. You could
Hmm.
also have your ashes become part of a coral reef or become a tree in a forest. There's all sorts of interesting
You
things
can be shot to space.
to do. You could be shot into space. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
yeah, having these conversations too, like with your kids, obviously when they're a little bit older, about what you want done can also kind of help progress the conversation surrounding death. It doesn't have to be like we were just talking about what we want to happen to us while we giggled a little bit about it, right? Like it doesn't need to be this dark topic. And I think especially when you're talking with kids, it's just as much a part of life as breathing is or being born is.
Or
And that,
sex. Yeah.
yeah,
It's serious and significant, but it's not, you can still talk about it.
yeah. um oh, we got this comment from Allie Stewart. We've dealt with a lot of death in my family this year. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Mhm.
With our two youngest children, 5 and 8, not so much my 13-year-old, we've told them that their loved ones become stars in the sky, and after that person or pet passes away, we go outside and they pick which star that is that person or pet, so that when they really feel they are missing their loved one, they can go, oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
quite
that.
delightful. And we can't, certainly can't say that that's wrong since we do seem to
Yeah.
come from stardust, and we return to the earth and the atmosphere and everything else. I actually think that's quite lovely. A lovely way to approach death with kids.
And Fernando said, people say that talking about death with children spooks them or leaves them anxious, but I see the opposite. When mother in law died, the kids took it remarkably well because they knew what to expect. And that is exactly it. Like, it is, I don't know, like a lot of people, they want to seem to shelter their kids from a lot of things. And then all of a sudden the kid is exposed to that thing out of the blue with no preparation, and it's that much more shocking to them, and it's going to happen in their life. There's nothing that you can do to help them avoid experiencing the death of another person, and it is your job to prepare your kids for these things, and it can be difficult. There's no questioning that, but you have to talk to your kids about death. You absolutely have to talk to your kids about death.
Yes, and how we grieve as adults is often a direct reflection of how grief and loss were handled in our own home. So, if our parents became workaholics rather than, pardon me, cope with the loss, we need to be aware of that. We might have that tendency ourselves because that's what was modeled for us. Or if you were crying as a child and instead of the parent listening and validating, they were shushing you,
Yeah.
that can be really harmful to
Yeah.
you something important, trying to share a feeling with you. To be shushed is very disrespectful. And so even though it hurts us when others are hurting, and we'd rather them not hurt because then we won't be hurting, that's not actually how it works. we want to be present for our kids and our teens and our partners and other people when they need to express their feelings around grief and loss.
Yeah, shushing hurts just as much when you're older too. um, Dominic said, "We just dealt with my father passing a couple of months ago. Again, I'm super sorry to hear that. That's so sad. Dealing with my dad post-stroke right now, and I just that's awful, and I'm sorry. Seems I was the only one that wasn't leaning on a God theory and level-headed about things, not grasping at straws and hanging on for a miracle. He was cremated." Interesting question. So what do we do when our kids are exposed to the rest of the family that still believe in God and heaven and all of that stuff, and are telling them they've gone to heaven, but when they come home they don't hear the same story? How do you think we should deal with that, Janice?
Well, I see that someone called Otangelo Grasso just said, naturalism cannot ground existence itself, uniformity in nature, logic, the value of human life, moral values, sound reasoning, intelligibility, consciousness. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. So it's important to expose kids to all sorts of different ideas. And right now, of course, with COVID still like raging around the world and killing so many people, it's possible, if not likely, that we are going to know somebody who's going to die, and that person that there's going to be a religious belief around what has happened. So speaking with your kids about being compassionate when other children say my daddy's in heaven or my grandma went to heaven or whatever, that your child can just say, I'm sorry you lost your grandma, and then you're free to talk with your child about what you actually think happens, and you're not making it some big scary thing. You're just talking about it matter of factly. And there's actually a really good kids book. I think it's called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs When I Die, After I Die, or something like that. It's just a great name. And actually looking at this this topic.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look up that book.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds dark.
I thought it was a great name.
But as far as like your kids being exposed to people saying they're going to be in heaven, because that's happened in my family too, where I remember when my grandfather died, it was a Catholic funeral, and it was nothing about him. It was all about God. And I remember wondering and questioning all of those things. And so I think when your kids are exposed to those sorts of ideas like heaven and the afterlife and stuff like that, and they come home and they have questions about it, I think that you should ask them, like you can explain to them what other people believe and incorporate other beliefs too, like tons of different beliefs, so they know that there's a bunch of different ways that people believe death happens. And then ask them what they believe. And just let them believe what they want to believe. They're little, and they're going to be growing up in a world with the internet at their fingertips, and they're going to be raised by atheists. So the chances of them actually turning out to be religious are very, very slim. However, if they did, it doesn't matter, because we would still love them, right?
You can also always say, if the child says, oh, Johnny said his uncle went to heaven or whatever, you can say, well, if heaven is the absence of suffering, if it's heaven to not be suffering anymore, yeah. But it's when there are the additional ideas that are woven all around it, like being judged, going to heaven and hell, sorting the wheat from the chaff, all these other religious ideologies and pictures that come to mind. We do want to address those with our kids. And yeah, and it's fine to say Johnny's family has this certain set of beliefs. We have a different set of beliefs, or here are my beliefs. And yeah, like you said, what do you think it might be? and then just
Yeah.
encourage lots of reading on the topic. But as soon as we forbid something, boy, oh boy, does that ever become super appealing to our kids. As soon as we say, you're never going to church or doing this or that, oh, guess what they want to do?
Yeah. John King says 100% honesty. The other people telling them about heaven are lying to themselves and others. I think that, I mean, to some degree, I agree, but also when you're indoctrinated, you truly believe those things,
Yep.
and it's not really that they're lying. Like, it's not the truth, but it's not that they're consciously lying to you.
And you can say that that's how they are trying to cope with their loss and their pain.
Yeah.
They tell themselves this story. There are creation stories with every culture. There are stories about afterlife with every culture as well. So I think I would couch it in terms of that's a story that they're telling themselves in their time of pain and grief, rather than saying they're lying.
That's how I've always dealt with it with my kids. If they ever ask about what other people believe, I'd just be like, sometimes, you know, people are scared, and this helps them to get through that fear. This is what this group of people believes. This is what this group of people believes. And I said, I don't believe any of that stuff, and whatever you end up believing is totally up to you. And then I always say, so what do you think you believe right now? And every single time with both of them, it's, I don't believe that. So
believing in like super religious people can actually have a big hard time with death. If the death is, if it's their 5-year-old, if it's their teenager, if it comes at a time or in an unnatural way, like something that they're not expecting, that can be a really big issue for them, because then they're not only coping with the loss of the child or the loved one, but they're also coping with the dissolution of their worldview, that God is just, God is fair, all these things. It can be a really hard time. And also, let's make sure that we never utter words like everything happens for a reason. Oh my God, that's one of the ones I hate so freaking much. Don't dispense platitudes. You're better just to be quiet and to listen and to say, I'm sorry, I'm here if you want to talk. Just bring them a casserole. You don't have to say you're going to pray for them if you don't believe in prayer and you're not going to pray for them. Do their laundry, hire a maid service, do something that's tangible that might help someone who's grieving and unable to fully care for their family while they're grieving.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people come at it from an angle of wanting to fix the death, and you can't do that. You cannot fix it. It's happened and it's irreversible. You can't fix it for anybody. You can't take the pain away. You can't make the grief any less. But what you can do is offer comfort and be there for them. And that's what my mom did. Back to the opening story about Archie and Jughead dying. That's what she did for me. She didn't offer me silly stories to try and take my pain away. She let me feel it. She respected me enough to let me feel my grief. And she shared it with me in an intimate moment that let me know that I wasn't alone. And I think that that is the absolute best thing to do. Just, you don't need to say anything. Just be there. You don't need the perfect thing to say. There is nothing. There is no such thing.
Yep. And there's a way to be there's a way to be honest without being a jerk. There's always a way to communicate that's kind and compassionate, as opposed to harsh and judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's be aware of the way that we say the things that we say. It's possible to do these things while remaining in your own integrity.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that's a good note to end on, because we have 1 minute left. But this worked out a lot better than last time. Let's just say that.
We didn't have all the gremlins and the technical problems here. So sign up for my workshop, the Divorcing Religion workshop, if you are someone who is on the journey from sacred to secular. It'll be very helpful. Take a look at the links that we've got, and take a look for that book, When I Die, Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? It's some similar to that. It's just I think a great little book.
Yeah. And in the comments, leave your ideas for the next topic, because we are going to be doing this every Tuesday at 1, providing things don't blow up again.
Yeah,
a lot of things blow up this week. My truck, your computer, my computer.
You never know what's going to happen again. This was so great to have everybody tune in and offering your thoughts about what we're talking about. We do this because of you. We appreciate when you say those things and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Yeah, really some awesome, thoughtful comments today. So thanks for joining us. And we will see you next week with as yet unknown topic.
It's a secret.
Yeah.
Bye,
Bye everybody.
Take care.